Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another video. So Obi-Wan Kenobi is here. It dropped early on Disney Plus, which was a massive treat, and I just watched the first 2 episodes, the double episode premiere. So right off the bat guys, what is very obvious is the leaks were true, and apart from a couple of surprises, which I will speak about, everything played out as outlined by Making Star Wars, which is what I've been reporting on for the past few weeks and months. Having said that, knowing a lot of the plot, I was blown away. For me it was simply phenomenal. Ewan's talent in sliding into the role of Obi-Wan cannot be overstated. He was perfect and it was just like being back in 2005 again, and now that he's closer in age to Alec Guinness when he portrayed Obi-Wan, it's clear the delivery of his lines are more in sync with the original depiction, and this is something Ewan's spoken about multiple times, how he's deliberately trying to emulate and summon that original character. Now, because there is so much to break down, I'm going to be focusing on key moments, scenes, Easter eggs and references, really honing in on the implications for the remaining 4 episodes, and we've got to talk about that plot twist at the end, not to mention a massive question surrounding the Grand Inquisitor. So no more jibber jabber guys, let's get straight into it. So before the show started, we got that lovely montage of important scenes from the prequels, and it ends with the famous quote from Yoda from the end of Revenge of the Sith, where he tells Obi-Wan that during his solitude on Tatooine, his old master has training for him, and we know that this training is to become a Force ghost. Now with the leaks seem to be panning out, and with Obi-Wan calling out to Qui-Gon twice in these first 2 episodes, I think it's a certainty that by the end of the season, we're going to see and hear Qui-Gon's Force ghost, but at the moment, Obi-Wan is very much disconnected from the Force. This much is made evident. Now the show so far has really done justice to the prequels aesthetic, and when the episode begins, the continuity works so well, so kudos to Deborah Chow. Of course, before Tatooine in the present day, where it says 10 years later, we have Order 66 flashbacks on Coruscant. We see the Jedi Temple as well as some unnamed Jedi Masters and their younglings, and in one group who escape, we see a young girl who's almost certainly a young Reva, and her story really is being explored in a patchy kind of way. We're getting little bits of info as we go along. For example, in episode 2 we learn that she didn't immediately give in to the Empire after surviving the Purge. She first tried to survive on the streets incognito before then submitting and becoming an Inquisitor. But as the Grand Inquisitor tells her later on, they all see her as lesser than the rest of them. But Reva in these 2 episodes was bloody brutal. Moses Ingram was incredible in the role, and I think they used her and the other Inquisitors just the right amount. They're kind of reserving them for intimidating moments, which makes them overall much more threatening, and I love that the Grand Inquisitor was finally given Sith eyes. This was a big one for me. The angrier he got, and the more he raged when they discovered Nari, he and the 5th brother became physically more terrifying. The Sith eyes as well as the veins that showed in their faces. So I will say guys that even though I did have reservations going into this from the promos and the trailers, my mind is changed. So moving on, just as the leak stated, Obi-Wan is incognito and working for an asshole boss as a sand whaler. A very smelly job. He comes home and of course there's a female Jawa named Tika who keeps selling his stuff back to him. He buys a T-16 Skyhopper toy for Luke, the one we see later in A New Hope. The toy will get to Luke by the end of the season, but for now, Owen throws it back at Obi-Wan, telling him to stay away from his family. As we know, Owen thinks Anakin is truly dead, and he blames it all on Obi-Wan, and he's really morphed into Alec Guinness's version. Or should I say it's rather a balance between prequels Obi-Wan and original trilogy Obi-Wan. Basically the perfect balance for this point in the timeline. He even says the line, "The Jedi are all but extinct," with the perfect Alec Guinness tone, and a lovely callback to the same line that Kenobi delivers to Luke in A New Hope. We see Obi-Wan have nightmares of the events that have passed, missing Anakin and the trauma of losing him to the dark side, and I'm sure there are more of these flashbacks to come. Now for me, one of the biggest highlights from these first 2 episodes was the contrast of the Skywalker children. They compared Luke's farm life, where they don't really have too much, to the luxurious upbringing of Princess Leia on Alderaan. Now Vivian Lyra Blair plays the sassy young princess perfectly, with a wonderful balance of comedy and elegance that is true of a younger version of Carrie Fisher's iconic character. It almost brought a tear to my eye to see her legacy through the performance of this young actress. And not to mention guys, just how beautiful Alderaan looks. I was thrilled to see Bail Organa and of course her husband, one of the most important characters in all of Star Wars, Bail Organa. We got a close look at Leia's droid Lola, who is the one inspired by the robots in Batteries Not Included. I found the Alderaan scenes to be a more refreshing change of environment. Also, 3PO made a brief cameo, as well as everyone's favourite astromech droid, R2-D2, who I like to call the heart and soul of Star Wars. One thing I will say of one of these sequences though, is that it makes the later destruction of Alderaan more tragic. It's when Bail tells Leia that she'll be responsible for their homeworld one day. It really hits you hard when you realise that Alderaan was destroyed before Leia's very eyes, where her parents were grieving because they assumed she was dead. Very dark indeed, but in this same scene, Bail mentions the Purrgil, which as a Star Wars Rebels fan was amazing. These of course were the space whales that would later launch Thrawn and Ezra into hyperspace. If we're ever going to see them in live action, it's going to be in the Ahsoka series. But back to this show, Princess Leia is kidnapped by none other than Flea of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and his crime gang. They were hired by Reva, who at this point is working separately from the other Inquisitors. Her big plan is to use Leia as bait to lure Obi-Wan in. It's kind of like what the Grand Inquisitor said earlier, the Jedi Code is like an itch, he cannot help it, and you must admit he's got a point. Meanwhile, on Tatooine, Obi-Wan has some guilt to deal with as he sees the young Jedi Nari hung only a day after he sought the help of Master Kenobi. Not only this, but the Organas make a plea to Obi-Wan to save their daughter. At first, he refuses, believing himself not to be up to the challenge, but Bail Organa literally gets his ass to Tatooine and successfully convinces Obi-Wan, his old friend, in person, saying there is no one he trusts more with his daughter. It's kind of teased that this is Obi-Wan's last big hurrah, his last big adventure if you will. So Obi-Wan obliges, he digs up his and Anakin's old lightsabers and heads to Daiyu. So now my friends, time for episode 2, or part 2 as they call it. On the scummy world of Daiyu, we get a lot of callbacks to the prequels. In Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan was offered death sticks by Elan Sel Sabagno. In this episode, he's offered spice in a similar way from a young woman. Unlike in episode 2 though, he does not tell this dealer to rethink her life, but it was a fun little reference. And then we have a jaw-dropping moment that makes the aftermath of the Clone Wars so tragic. We see a clone begging in the streets. I can't believe Tamar Morrison was in this. It was not in the leaks, which gives me some hope that he might have a bigger role later in the show as a more familiar clone. This one is unnamed though, but who knows, it might even be Hauser, hopefully not. Obi-Wan comes across Haja, Kumail Nanjiani's character, who is a con man, pretending to be a Jedi medium who does favors in exchange for credits. He ends up being an ally by the end, and helps Obi-Wan and Leia get off-world, something that was focal in episode 1 but more so in the second episode, were the Inquisitors and their spats with Reva. By the end, she's pretty much on her own mission to hunt down Kenobi, while the Grand Inquisitor and Fifth Brother see her as a nuisance, as a threat who can get them in trouble. They're all convinced she's crazy for thinking that she can capture Kenobi, and even if she does, they fear she's only doing it to gain favor with Lord Vader himself. Now Obi-Wan is trying to save Leia, and while he does get her out the spice den, it takes him using the Force to save her life to convince the young princess that he's on her side, and that her dad really did send him. Now it's interesting how weakened the Force Kenobi is. He's not confident with his lightsaber just yet. It's going to take some time. After Haja defeats Wanjak, the new bounty hunter we all assumed was Forlom, Kenobi and Leia prepare to escape, and this is when Reva is on their trail. Now there's a really heartwarming moment here when Leia's bossiness comes through. She wants to take control of the situation, and this reminds Obi-Wan of her biological mother Padme, who herself was a strong-headed leader. I love these callbacks because they make the experience of the show that much more sentimental. So when Reva gets close to them, she tells Obi-Wan that Vader is still alive. She uses both Vader's name and Anakin. And the look on Obi-Wan's face of shock was priceless. Brilliant acting, and the perfect cliffhanger to end this episode on. The Grand Inquisitor tries to butt in and says that he'll show Reva how it's done. And this is the moment that shocked me. Reva clean stabs him in the abdomen and he falls to the floor cold, but the Grand Inquisitor is still alive later in the timeline in Star Wars Rebels, so this is what baffles me. There are two options here. Either the Grand Inquisitor is different to the one in Rebels, in that Vader might hire a different Padawan to replace him. After all, there could be more temple guards who converted. Or the Grand Inquisitor is going to survive this. The latter is more likely, but you never know. Deborah might pull off a plot twist. Let's wait and see, but I think he's going to survive this. Our episode ends when Obi-Wan whispers Anakin's name and Vader awakens from his Bacta tank. We didn't get the post-credit scene that was teased, but his eyes beamed red and the screen cuts to black. Vader is coming, guys, and I'm psyched. I really can't put it into words. These 2 episodes put together were like one amazing movie. Both episodes get a 10 out of 10 from me, and it's everything I wanted for the start of a Kenobi show, doing justice to what came before and giving us a thrilling ride with endless references and connective tissue. I think this definitively proves that we need Deborah Chow directing much more Star Wars. Bring on episode 3 on Wednesday. I can't wait. But with that said, guys, I'm going to leave it to you. What did you make of the first 2 episodes? Did they impress you? Did they not impress you? Whatever your opinion, share it in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always. I'm Star Wars Meg. Have a good one.